Okay, so good day everyone. For today's discussion, we are going to be discussing about perception. So hopefully, you have read the chapter, and this discussion will just serve as a clarification. So, just a reminder, guys, to take note of the things that you want to clarify, the things that you didn't might not understand fully in the textbook as well as in the discussion. So, we'll talk about it in our synchronous class when we have the time. So, this will also help you out in answering our quiz for this chapter. Okay, so these are some of the questions to consider in today's chapter or today's discussion. So first off, why can two people experience different perceptions in response to the same stimulus? Next is how does perception depend on a person's knowledge about the characteristics of the environment. And then the third one, how does the brain become tuned to respond best to things likely to appear in the environment? And then lastly, what is the connection between perception and action? Okay. So first off, when we define perception, is um, it is defined as experience resulting from stimulation of the senses. So, as we have learned in our Gen Psych, if kung naalala nyo pa, di ba? So, the senses are usually the ones that would have the information from the stimulus. So, depending on the stimulus. And then, pagdating sa once na-receive na siya ng sensory organs natin, like for example, the eyes or the ears, ipaprocess na siya and this becomes the perception. So, this is also why the concept of perception is quite subjective. Kasi, kung titingnan natin itong part na to, ayan, experience resulting from stimulation of the senses. So, the experience that we might have from our senses being stimulated differ or vary from person to person. Kahit na sabihin natin, iisang stimulus lang ang pinanggalingan, the way we experience it might vary, di ba? Kaya nga yung picture na nakikita natin na may dalawang tao tapos may number, depending on how you look at it, it's either number 9 or number 6. So, ang tanong doon, mali ba yung dalawang yon? The answer is, parang silang tama. Kasi nga, they are given the same stimulus, but they process it according to how they perceive it, according to how they experience that said stimulus. So, another thing about perception is that it can be changed based on added information. So, like for example, di ba yung when we learned about our colors, di ba we started first with the primary colors, yung let's say yung Crayola natin na 8 pieces lang. Diba, the basic color there is black, brown, violet, red, blue, green, orange, and yellow. So those are all the 8 colors in the inner Crayola set. However, as we get older, dito na natin makikita na parang, iba-iba palang tonality or tones ng color. So this is why, yung violet, meron siyang shades na purple, ano ba yung orchid, di ba? Yung mga nakikita na natin na mga never heard na color na na hindi familiar sa atin, we understand it better kasi nga nadagdagan na yung information natin about the tones, the different tones of the color resulting to different hues. But then it comes from the same family of color. So that is how our perception can change. Basta may naidagdag na information, nag-change yung prior understanding natin or experience natin doon sa bagay na yun. Now, when it comes to perceiving, nakita na, alam natin is that it involves a process similar to reasoning and problem solving. So, when we perceive things, likely, yung mga areas na ano ba to, active during or when we reason or we solve problems would be the ones that will be also active when we perceive things. Although, syempre, may pagkakaiba yon depending on what senses are involved in the perception. And then, perceptions occur in conjunction with our actions. So, with that one, we have, when we perceive things, it is something that prompts us to do something or prompts us to do something else or involves some kind of behavior. Kasi nga, again, perception is how we understand the stimulus. So, based from that understanding, we will be doing something about it. Okay. And it is possible that true human perceptual processes are unique to humans. So, with this particular content, we know that technology have tried to mimic the perception of humans. However, up until now, it's quite difficult for them to accurately duplicate yung ating pag-perceive. And this is because of many reasons na malalaman natin as we go through the chapter. Ayan. So, ito yung sasabi ko nga. Attempts to create AI or artificial forms of perception have been met with limited success and each time had problems that could not be solved. Okay, so with the advancement in technology, bakit nga ba parang ang hirap gawin or ang hirap gayahin yung perception ng humans or mahirap siyang ibigay sa mga machines or bigyan ng ganong capacity ang mga machines. So, this is of the following reasons. So, first off, there is the inverse projection problem. So, the inverse projection problem, this refers to the task determining the object responsible for a particular image on the retina. So we have this process in the eye, di ba, na pag nakita natin nakikita natin yung isang bagay and we can see it or we perceive it as right side up. However, if we would see inside of our eye or if we understand well the process of our eye, the image on the retina is upside down. So, paano siya nagiging right side up? So, it's the brain that's processing it to be right side up. So, yun yung unang-unang problema doon. Another is that it involves starting with the retinal image and then extending outward to the source of the image. So, with that kind of kind of function of our retina, hindi rin siya mamimik ng machine. Kasi nga, our retina has the capacity to um, see the image extending outward. So, aside from the image itself, we are also processing the things around that image. And then, from that processing or from that function, we're able to really make sure na, ito lang yung boundaries nitong object na to. The other ones are backgrounds. So, hindi yan kailangan. But, the background helps us with understanding better the image that we're seeing. And this particular function of the eye or the retina is quite difficult to duplicate with machines. Kasi parang, of course, ang dami mong pa dong i-embed na program. And then, the idea that objects can be hidden or blurred are also quite difficult to mimic in machines kasi when we see objects, we are able to identify the object itself kahit na partially lang siya nakikita. So, like for example, yung figure 3.8 sa inyong libro, so that's on page 66. So, we see a lot of objects on the desk, right? So, but then we can see that the pencil under the I think this is a pamphlet. This is a university pamphlet. Under the university pamphlet is a whole pencil. So it is hidden, but we understand that this is a pencil. And then we also see one of the bang tawag doon sa glass, yung pangsabit sa tenga. So, yung isang part ng glasses nakikita natin sa likuran ng laptop. And we know it's part of a glass. In a computer or with machines, this is quite difficult to do kasi with machines, they need a certain threshold to be able to understand what they are seeing or to be able to recognize na what they are seeing, especially if the objects are hidden or if the objects are blurred. Okay, so aside from that, objects look different from different points of view. So, we have that kind of capacity na kahit saan natin siya tingnan, we know that it's the same object. This is also quite difficult to do to machines, yung viewpoint invariance. Kasi nga, again, it involves very complex programming and maraming algorithms yan in order to achieve just this particular function of perception. And then with that one, aside from that one, there are also since the machines need to be programmed, magiging mahirap din sa machine na i-process yung scenes that contain high-level information. So, ano yung mga scenes na yun, ma'am? So, pwede of course, yung environment natin. So, like for example, a traffic scene in Guadalupe Bridge, diba? So, in that particular scene, pag nakikita natin, alam natin na traffic. And then, at the same time, we understand na itong sa part na to, nandoon yung dadaanan ng MRT, itong way na to or itong highway na to papunta ng north, and the other one is papunta ng south. And then we can process the billboards, we can process the houses around the area, both the ones in Makati and then the ones in Mandaluyong boundary. So looking at that same scenario, we are already processing a lot of things And then, siguro pag binaba pa natin further or tinaasan pa natin further yung processing, pag tinanong kayo, what kinds of cars were stuck in the traffic on Guadalupe Bridge? So, makikita nyo, doon na kayo mag-focus na, may mga bus, may mga sedan na sasakyan, and then so on and so forth. These kinds of scenes are quite difficult to process by machines. Kasi nga, ang daming stimulus. So, dahil maraming stimulus, maraming objects na ipaprocess. So, pag maraming objects na ipaprocess, marami rin siyang kailangang information beforehand and maraming programming na involved in order for a machine to be able to understand that scenario. So, okay? And then, of course, aside from the environment itself and the stimulus, we also have our prior knowledge and expectations that we are bringing to that same situation or that same scenario. So, again, we already know that it's a highway, and quite a busy highway for that matter. So, alam na natin, may mga certain expectations na tayo na, maraming dumadaang sasakyan dyan. Around the area, meron din of course yung mga industrial buildings as well as mga low structure, low structures like home. So, may mga ganun na tayong idea before looking at that particular stimulus, and that one is actually quite difficult for a machine to mimic or to program in itself. Okay. So, ito yung sinasabi ko kanina. So, the information used in human perception are the two. So, of course, we have the stimulus, the environmental energy stimulating the receptors. So, these are all the stimulus around us. And then, of course, our knowledge and expectations that we bring to the situation. So, prior to the stimulus, meron na tayo nito. Okay, so what are the approaches that we use in order to understand perception? So there are a lot of theories about that. So we have the bottom-up processing. With the bottom-up processing, this is so this is the type of processing that begins in the system. So when there is energy, environmental energy stimulates the receptors. So makikita natin siya in an example like when the image is transmitted to our retina, and then it is papunta na nung area sa brain natin na ipaprocess yung visual stimulus na to. So that's bottom-up processing. So another example is when we smell things, di ba? So when we smell yung nasa-sense ng ilong natin, and then going to the olfactory part of the brain that will process ano ba yung naamoy mo, mabaho ba yun, does it smell kuwari pagkain, di ba? Especially if the food looks suspicious, aamuyin muna natin. So Usually that's how bottom-up processing is done. So the bottom-up processing is part of the direct perception theories. So yun nga kasi, 'di ba, the information starts with our sensory organ most of the time. And then ayun, we just identify things, or we identify the parts of the environmental energy, and then we put it together in order to recognize what's happening. So like for example, yun nga yung parang yung suspicious na food. So you try to smell it first, and then ayun, parang panis na to, or pwede pa to kainin, sige kakainin ko na. So that's how we perceive that kind of information if we're going to be utilizing this theory. And then we also have the constructive perception theory, which is the top-down processing, wherein people actively construct perceptions using information based on expectation. So like what happened in your ano ba to? Dichotic listening experiment. In a dichotic listening experiment, you were given nonsense syllables like ka, ga, pa, pa, and ta, and da, ta at saka da. Okay. Now, if you're not learning Korean, it's quite easier for you to recognize the syllables. I think so, ha? Pero pag-usapan natin yan pag natapos na tayo sa activity. Unlike for someone who's learning Korean, yan, medyo problematic yung experiment na yun. So, I'm not sure yet. I haven't really done it with people who's learning Korean. But when I did try the experiment, I had trouble, I really had trouble deciphering, especially kung ang words na binabato niya sa akin ay ka at saka ga. This is because when you study Korean, ka and ga are usually or it sounds alike in Hangul or in the Korean language. So what I'm doing there is top-down processing. So dahil nadagdagan na yung information ko based on what I have learned so far with Hangul, nag-process ako nung same stimulus in a different manner as compared to someone who's not really actively learning that language. So, ano pa pwede nating example dito? Yun nga, yung kanina na traffic scene, or a highway scene in Guadalupe Highway or Guadalupe Bridge. So, meron ka na kagad information doon na parang sasabihin mo, Guadalupe, laging traffic doon. So, that's top-down processing, na meron ka ng expectations or meron ka ng prior information about it, and you're using it in order to see and understand the situation better. So it's kaya siya tinawag na top down. It's coming from the brain first kasi nga meron kang expectations na galing sa iyong cognition, and then going down to your senses. So that's top down processing. Okay, to explain further, the bottom-up processing, ayan nga, it may start with the senses. So, the things that we see, the things that we smell, hear, or touch. So, these are all our senses that yung unang pinagpapasahan ng raw data. And usually, the senses get it from the environmental energy which they register on the receptors. So, remember, may mga kanya-kanya receptors yung mga sensory organs natin. And then, these receptors transfer the information to the neurons. Or, ito yung mga neural receptors natin which transfer information to other parts of the body hanggang sa makaawit siya ng brain para ma-process ni brain ano ba yung nangyari or ano ba yung nakita mo or na-sense mo na smell mo, narinig mo. And then, top-down processing, ayan, perception may start with the brain and it usually includes the person's knowledge, experience, and expectations. So, yun, katulad nga nun sa dichotic experiment, if you're learning Korean, you might had a difficult time really deciphering ano ba yung narinig mo kaysa dun sa taong hindi nag-aaral ng Korean. Because, eto nga. Now, what we see in this particular picture, this is the complexity of perception. Ito yung hindi mamimik ng computer. So, like for example, although the pictures are quite blurry, we understand anong nangyayari to sa picture. Or ano yung dinidepict ng mga blob na nakikita natin dito. 'Di ba? So, alam natin na with blob A or blob B, it's a picture of or the one in the red part for blob B is an object on the table. Okay. Blob C, we know that it is a shoe on a person bending down. And then blob D, we can decipher that it's a car here and a person who seems to be walking or crossing the street. Whereas with A, it's quite difficult to understand what A is. So, bakit kaya? Kasi, wala tayong ibang background information about it. So, more or less, this is what is happening with computers when they see. Yan. Kaya hindi mamimik yung level ng perception ng tao, ng mga machines. It's because of the limitations of a machine as compared to us. Sa atin kasi, kaya natin naiintindihan ang isang bagay, even though it's blurry or even though it's just a blob, it's because we also have prior knowledge about these things, yung nasa background nila. So pretty much we are using top-down processing in order to understand ano ba yung mga blob na to. 'Di ba? So katulad nito, we understand that this part is a building of sorts. And this part, itong gray area na to, it might be a street. So, which is, kung titignan nyo, which is logical. Kasi nga, we don't see a building na, pagkatapos ng building, parang floating lang siya, or air lang ang katabi niya, walang ibang nakalagay. Usually, we see a building on besides a street. Okay, and the same with this one. We understand that this part is a person. So, therefore, this particular part, and given na magkakulay itong dalawa, might be also parang extension nung taong to. And dahil ganyan yung itsura niya, we understand that this might be a shoe of the person. So that's how we understood the blob, or we understood a blurry picture, even though the picture is not 100% quality, or it's not a good, yeah, it's not a good quality, and pretty much we don't hindi dapat natin maintindihan, pero naintindihan natin siya. Aside from that, when we hear words in a sentence, we also use a top-down processing in order to understand the language based on the individual experience with the language. So, like for example, yung sinasabi ko nga sa inyo kanina, when I did the dichotic listening experiment, I was really torn in answering if I heard ka on my left ear or ga on my right ear, or vice versa. Again, this is because of a prior or an individual experience that I have with a language that uses the syllables ka and ga as main part of its language. So, the process of speech segmentation, this is the ability to tell when one word ends and another begins. So, kahit na mabilis siyang magsalita, 'di ba, napipick up natin kung ano yung sinasabi niya. A good example would be for rappers. Rappers, when they rap, they don't they do it in a fast manner, to such extent na pag hindi mo naiintindihan yung words na sinasabi niya, or you don't speak the language, all of these things will just be gibberish. However, if you understand the language itself, you will be able to pick out na, ito yung sinabi niya, kahit ang bilis-bilis ng pagkakasabi niya. Kasi nga, that's how speech segmentation works. You're able to tell na this is one word and the other one is another word, or in Filipino, 'di ba? We know that we are using a compound words, like for example, malay tao, or yung yung mga nursery songs, yung tutuka-tuka, 'di ba? So those things are understood by us due to speech segmentation. Because we understand the language, we know that we know where one word ends and where another word begins. And aside from that, there is also the capacity for transitional probabilities. Now, with transitional probabilities, this is knowing which sound will likely follow another in a word. So, with this one, meron din po tayong idea, ano kaya yung susunod na word doon sa sinabi. Kasi nga, we have this transitional probabilities. Like, for example, yung pakapakapa. Diba? Pakapakapa. And pakikipagbaka. So, kung makikita mo yun, most of the syllables ends with a. So, you would understand that the next syllable will likely end in a. Like, pakapakapa, pakikibaka. Pakikibaka is hindi pala, sorry. Aandap-andap. Diba? So, may doon sa syllables na yun. Kahit hindi siya purely nagtatapos sa na syllable, the A part in that word is has an A in the syllable. Okay? Okay. With the top-down theory, or using the top-down theory, so we understand that some perceptions are the result of unconscious assumption we make about the environment. So, minsan, this usually happens to us na, di ba yung mga instances na ikaw yung magdudugtong doon sa sinasabi nung kasama mo? Kuwari sabi niya, nalimutan ko nga kasi yung ano ko yung P. O, diba? So, sabi mo, pitaka? Or, tapos sasabi nung isa naman, piso? Diba? So, usually we would say that pitaka. Kasi nga, we understood, we have this unconscious assumption. Like, for example, aalis kayo, may pupuntahan kayo, tapos sasabihin niya, ayun, nalimutan ko nga yung pitaka. Wala naman sa atin magsasabi ng nalimutan niya yung pisara niya. Kasi, diba, sino ba magdadala ng blackboard paglalayas or maglalakwat siya. So, this is the result of a top-down, or using the top-down processing. Now, we are unconsciously making an assumption from what we hear, so the environment, or what we see, diba? Or sometimes, pag may nakikita tayo, diba, na sabihin mo, buo yung ano na yan. Kuwari, may nakita tayong, end ng rope. Or, headset, yung may cord na headset. Tapos, hindi mo nakita yung the rest ng headset. May assumption ka na buo yung headset na yon, na makikita mo yung the rest of the headset because you understand the idea na a headset has a line, or it is connected by a cable. So, we use this knowledge in order to inform us of our perceptions. So, we make these assumptions in order for us to understand what we're saying, what we are sensing most of the time. And then we infer much of what we know about the world. So, like for example, ito nga yung kaninang natin sinasabi, we understand that the headset, especially kung may makita tayong tali doon, it's a headset na old school. Right? Kasi nga, yung dati namang headset, ganun eh. Pero, pag nakita lang natin yung headset, or yung earplugs lang, tapos walang cord, we know that pretty much it's a wireless headset, or it's a wireless earphone. So, those are the new things that we understand about these devices. Pero, 10 years ago, pag nakakita tayo ng parang isang part lang ng, alam mo yun, yung itsura ng AirPods, we know na sira yung yung headset na yon. Bakit? Kasi wala siyang cord. So, that, these inferences are based from what we know about the world. So, 10 years ago, hindi gumagana pag nakita natin yung mga AirPods ngayon, ibalik mo siya 10 years ago, or i-travel mo siya to the past around 10 years ago. We know that they won't work. They won't play music when we use them because wala pa tayong concept or wala pa tayong idea ng AirPods at that time. However, at present, 'di ba? Pag nilagay mo na siya doon sa labas at nakita mo na may headset, may earphones. And then, kahit makita mo na wala siyang cord, you would know na likely gagana to, or mataas ang chance na gagana to. Bakit? Kasi nga, we already have devices like that na cordless na. And then we also have the likelihood principle where we perceive the world in the way that is most likely based on our past experiences. So, katulad nga nung sinabi ko kanina, the idea about headset or AirPods or wireless earphones. So, these are all based on our past experiences. So, most likely, gagana siya ngayon, pero put it 10, 20 years ago, it's not going to work. Kasi nga, wala naman tayong concept nun ng wireless earphone or headsets. Okay. Okay, so this is a display, or this is another example of how we perceive an object. Okay, so like for example with A, this particular picture gives us the idea, or makes us look at it na itong si rectangle na blue nasa harapan nitong red rectangle. So this is why it's partially covered. However, ayan. So parang pag titingnan natin siya on a side view, ganito dapat ang itsura niya. Okay? However, or most of us would answer na ganito itsura niya sa side view. Pero, sure ba tayo dyan? Kasi baka ito yan, yung C. This is the idea of Helmholtz unconscious inference. Kasi nga, unconsciously, when we just first see this, or pag ito pa lang ang nakikita natin, automatic parang naisip mo na, nasa harapan niyang blue. Tapos pag sinide view yan, ito yung itsura niyan. It would rarely occur to us that it could be possibly like this. Na kaya ganyan ang itsura niya, it's because hindi naman talaga rectangle yung red shape. But it's a six-sided figure and not a four-sided rectangle. Okay. So, this is, or moving on to perceptual organization. The view before about perception was explained by structuralism. Wherein, ang sabi nilang structuralist is that perception involves adding up sensation. So, kung ano yung nasa-sense mo through your eyes, your sense of smell, those things. So, all of this are, all of the senses that we have are involved in order to have a perception. However, this is not what the Gestalt people wanted to see. It's, they disagree with the structuralist view. So, according to the Gestalt principle, ang sabi nila is that the mind groups patterns according to intrinsic laws of perceptual organizations. So, the reason why we are able to perceive things, like for example, itong picture na to, the reason why we are able to perceive it as a face of a woman or as a picture of a woman created by dots, it's because of the laws of perceptual organization. And not because pinagsama-sama natin yung mga senses natin, or in this case, yung lahat ng information na nag-gather ng mata in order to come up with this picture. Hindi daw ganon. But rather, yung pagkaka-form nitong mga dots na to, they are formed according to the laws of perceptual organization, which is why we're able to perceive or see a face here. Okay? Okay, so what what are the uh, first, or what's the first Gestalt principle? So, we have the principle of good continuation. So, ang sabi dito is that the lines tend to be, or lines tend to be seen as following the smoothest path. So, the rope on the beach here, and then we also see the rope on the beach here. So, parehas lang sila nasa beach. However, with the B figure, the good continuation helps us to perceive the rope as a single strand. So, the idea here is that alam natin na itong nakabulumbon na rope na to ay iisang rope lang. Due to the principle of good continuation. So, this one, na-trace natin na, ay, mukhang isang linya lang yan. Whereas, kung wala tayong point of distinction, wala yung red part indicating this specific part of the rope, this one, the letter A, it doesn't really make a lot of sense. Okay, and then we also have the law of pragnance, otherwise known as principle of simplicity or good figure. So, with this particular principle, ang sabi niya, every stimulus pattern is seen so the resulting structure is as simple as possible. So, with this one, we can see the figure A. We all know the figure A as the Olympic symbol. So, ang nandito ay, dahil nga we have or we follow this law, we understand that this the circles are all of the same sizes. And we understand that this is a very simple structure. And parang pag tinanong ka, magkakasize ba yan? Automatic ang sasagot mo, oo, magkakasize yan. Because of this particular law. It's a simple structure. And with its simplicity, you understand that the circles are going to be of the same sizes. So, hindi siya ganito. Yeah, diba? Hindi mo siya i-isolate itong parts na to because of this particular law. And this is also why if you would remember yung balita na I think it's ASEAN yung sports event na puro circle lang yung finalo, yung ginawang symbol for that sports event na ang daming bumatikos nga dun sa chair nung event na yon. Si Cayetano, 'di ba? So, this is because, this is sa mga sinasabi ng mga friend ko na psychologist, parang, my God, hindi pa nag-aral ng ano ba to? Hindi ba nag-aral ng perception itong designer ng ganito, pati yan si ganyan-ganyan, hindi niya ba alam yun? Na parang, when it comes to designing things, it should follow the law of pragnance. In order to make it really simple as it can be, and not really kumbaga not all over the place, diba? Kung makikita nyo kasi ulit, or kung ma-remember nyo yung design, it was all over the place. It doesn't follow the law of pragnance. Even this principle of similarity, hindi niya rin finalo. Kaya parang, ano ba yan, ang gulo-gulo. So, this is the next Gestalt principle, the principle of similarity. Now, the principle of similarity, we tend to see similar things as grouped together. So, like for example, itong mga dots na to, diba? It seemed to be all of the same tone. Parang pula siya. Kahit saan ka tumingin, mukhang pula siya. Kasi nga, these are all similar things. And then, you can see it as in horizontal rows and vertical columns or both. So you can perceive it as paganon or patayo. However, with B, dahil nga pinagsama-sama siya per color, you understand that the dots are presented only in vertical columns. Wala tayong nakikita or hindi natin masyado pinapapansin itong horizontal because it doesn't follow the principle of similarity. Dahil nga, magkakaibang kulay yung nakagrupo pag horizontally mo siya titingnan. Okay, and this is also a good example of similarity, diba? Pag unang tingin mo, parang, oh, teka lang, ano ba yan? So, yan, naka-align kasi siya doon sa waves, doon sa white, the foamy part of the sea, the waves. And then, kakulay nung parang cardigan niya, yung sea. And then, halos magka-match ng kulay din yung palda niya at yung sand. So, the similarity of color here, kahit unintentional, had caused us to group these things together. Malalaman lang natin na tao siya because of this part na kasi may buhok at saka may part ng kamay. But if we would only look at it like this, parang it would take a while for us to see na, ay teka, parang tao yan, diba? So, this is a good example of the principle of similarity in a picture. So, perception is determined by specific organizing principle, not just the dark and the light stimuli activating the retina. So, the role of experience is minor compared to this intrinsic built-in principles. So, as per the Gestalts yan ha, kasi sa top-down processing, malaki ang role ng experience and prior knowledge doon sa pag-perceive natin. On the other hand, experience can influence the perception, but this is not a key driver. So, para sa Gestalt, hindi siya yung, kumbaga, hindi talaga siya yung nag-i-influence or a major influence sa ating pag-perceive ng mga bagay-bagay. Okay. Now, the regularities in the environment, isa pa rin to sa bagay or isa pa rin to sa mga dahilan kung bakit ang hirap i-mimic ang perception ng tao sa machine. It's because we are parang innately already understanding the common properties in the environment. So, we have this what we call the oblique effect. So, with the oblique effect, we perceive verticals and horizontals more easily than other orientation. So, remember yung cat na parang pinalaki in a horizontal environment or vertical environment. So, tayo, parang ganun din daw tayo na we had adapted after several generations and mutations of mankind. We have adapted to our environment that is mostly consisted of vertical and horizontal lines. So, like for example, the trees, which are vertical lines, and the horizon here, or the land here, which is made up of horizontal lines. Ito yung madalas na nakikita natin. The same here. Diba? Itong mga parang rock formations na to, I cannot call it as mountain kasi it doesn't look like a mountain for me. So, we can see this formation and the trees, which we know are more or less vertical lines. And then, kung may picture dito ng beach or ng sea, we see the sea in a more horizontal perspective. So, makikita din natin yung pagiging partial nating as humans sa man-made structures in terms of our buildings, 'di ba? So parang wala masyadong architectural design na ibang shape or ibang orientation other than usually vertical and horizontal. So, although may mga gumagawa ng mga designers, but this is quite or those are quite difficult to do and more expensive kasi nga hindi siya regular orientation na nakikita sa environment, be it a natural environment or a man-made environment. We also have this light from above assumption, wherein we assume light comes from above because it is common in our environment. Which is true. Kasi asan ba yung sun? Di ba nasa taas siya? So, in terms of our orientation, we already know or we innately know that the light comes from the light comes above. So, therefore, kung anong matamaan niya, 'di ba? Kaya nga tayo nakakapag-base kung anong oras na based on where we are or what time it is based on where is our shadow. 'Di ba? Kasi nga we have this assumption. And then we are also able using that particular knowledge, we also perceive our shadows as specific information about the depth and the distance. So, ayan. Kaya alam natin din yan. So, in the next figure, ayan, makikita natin. So, this is the same figure pretty much. So, like in A, so the indentations made by people walking on the sand. And then B, tinurn upside down yung picture. And it turns the indentations to rounded mounts. So, the light, in C, we can see that the light is here. So, kaya alam natin na itong part na to ay depressed or nakalubog siya. Right? Kasi yung shadow niya nandito. However, nung plinip siya, using the same light, because we have the idea of because our idea is nasa taas nga yung light nang gagaling, we can see that the shadow is here instead of palubog. Diba? Kaya nga, we're looking at the same picture, but then we are not understanding the same picture in the same manner. Binago lang yung orientation niya. So, ang nakikita na natin dun sa indentation kanina, ano na siya? Umalsa na siya. 'Di ba? Kasi nga nagbago yung orientation. Nagbago rin yung position kung asan yung shadow. So, dahil may nagbago doon, nagbago na rin yung understanding natin dito sa tinitingnan natin. Okay? Pero try mo ulit i-flip yung yung libro mo, you will be saying pretty much the same thing. Okay. So there is also the concept of regularities of the environment. So, the given scene is related to what happens within that scene. So, ano ibig sabihin nun, ma'am? Okay. So, pag tinanong ko kayo to picture out a department store, so definitely you will be able to picture out yes, Lagayan ng yung parang mga damit or kung sapatos, 'di ba? Tapos they are arranged depending sa brand or depending on the color. So this is what we call semantics. So dahil nga ang sabi sa inyo department store, you know that these are the things that we will see in a department store. Hindi tayo makakakita ng table sa department store at may fast food sa loob ng department store. Usually, nasa labas siya ng department store. Kasi nga, it's not what the environment calls for. It's not part of the semantics. So, pero pag sinabi kong mall, 'di ba? Picture out ay mall. Alam mong may mga may part na may kainan, may part na may parang the department store or yung mga boutique, 'di ba? So that's the semantics that you know about a mall. So ayan. So, katulad nga ng, dito example. In a jewelry case at Tiffany's, would you expect to see a plate of fish and chips or diamond rings? So, definitely, wala tayong makikita dong fish and chips. By the way, chips are French fries in England. England and Australia, if I'm not mistaken. Baka kasi mag-isip kayo ng yung mga chips like tortillos, or Mr. Chips, hindi yun yung chips na sinasabi nila dito. French fries yan. So, definitely, hindi tayo makakita ng fish and chips doon sa jewelry case nila because that is Tiffany's. Or, kung di kayo familiar with Tiffany's, Pandora. 'Di ba? So, sa Pandora, wala tayong makikita doong fried chicken at saka French fries ng Jollibee. Ang nandun ay mga bracelet, mga jewelry, 'di ba? Because that is the scene schema. And ito yung mga ina-expect natin makikita in this particular scene or particular setting. Alright, so the other one that allows us to process or perceive things is the Bayesian inference. So, Bayesian inference is one's estimate of the probability of a given outcome is influenced by these two factors. So, the first one is the prior probability. So, ito yung alam mo. And then the other one is the likelihood of a given outcome. So, in the case of this graph, so like for example, this graph, okay, so kung hindi yung masyado makita, go to your textbook. It's on page nga pala to, 76. Okay, so we have here Mary, and Mary has an idea that having colds might be equal to heartburn. So, yung pag sinisipon ka daw, ano na daw yon, heartburn na daw yon. So, that, we will mark it as her priors. Ayan yung una niyang idea about cold, heart, and heartburns as well as lung disease. So, ang sabi niya is that pag mas marami kang colds, mas mataas ang chance na it's a heartburn or probability of it being a heartburn is high. So, yun yung prior niya. Yun yung una niyang alam. However, the data that she has or let's say for example, may kakilala siya na may colds. Yun, sinabi niya nga to. Pero, sinabi sa kanya, hindi, ano ka ba? Hindi yan, ganyan. So, ni-research niya ngayon. Nagtingin siya. Hindi siya naniwala sa fake news lang. Baka kasi fake news yung sinasabi ni Charles. So, nakita niya na instead of heartburn, the colds has a higher likelihood of it being a lung disease instead of a heartburn. nakita niya rin doon sa ni-research niyang data na mas mababa ang chances that it's a heartburn if you have a high frequency of getting colds. So, pagdating dito, yan, ito na yung kanyang inference. Knowing, based from what she know before and what she had recently, ano ba to? Recently learned, ito na yung naging conclusion niya. Na, since lagi kang sinisipon, it might be a lung disease and not a heartburn. So, kasi pinagsama niya na yung prior niya and yung kanyang likelihood dito. So, prior probability and likelihood of a given outcome. So, that is an example of a Bayesian inference. So, in the recent elections, we also have done that one. Na you have a prior knowledge about kung sinong iboboto mo, and then what's the likelihood, ano yung given outcome, na this person will become a good leader, and then yun yung conclusion mo, right? So, if your prior is, or if your prior is already problematic, katulad nung kay Mary, and then yung likelihood na ginawa mo, or yung mga information na nakita mo, or further data na nasilip mo ay not reliable sources, the conclusions might be problematic. So, this is also why, parang hindi natin masisisi yung iba kung bakit yun ang binoto nila. I'm not naming names here. I'm just stating facts based on what we are studying. So, maybe because here, yun nga, ang problema kasi natin, it's not how we perceive per se, but rather where we are getting the data from. So, if the data is pretty much erroneous, affected talaga yung inference natin later on. Okay, so let's compare the conceptions of an object perception. So, when we use a top-down processing, we are doing unconscious inferences, or what we know previously, or based on our prior experience about it, we are able to process, like for example, know what the person is going to say, or know that this is part, or this AirPods are going to work. And then we also have, of course, the environmental regularities na processing the horizontal and vertical lines well. So, which helps us to understand the depth and the distance of things better. And then also we have the Bayesian inference, wherein we have the prior knowledge and then the likelihood of a given outcome are put together in order to come up with a conclusion. And then with the bottom-up processing, what we see based on our senses, or what are the stimulus received by the senses, are usually following Gestalt principles that allow us to make sense of what we are receiving from the stimulus. Okay, so moving on to a more technical. So, ito na naman ang ating mga neurons, no? So, again, this is cognitive psychology. So, talagang hindi pwedeng mawala ang usapin ng mga neurons dito sa usapang to. So, neurons, there are some neurons that respond best to things that occur regularly in the environment. So, like for example, we have been raised in an environment that is usually made of vertical and horizontal lines. So, this is why our neurons are like that. And if we go back to the history of mankind, Kaya hanggang ngayon, dala-dala pa rin natin siya. It is a way for the early men to adapt to the environment. And of course, adaptation means survival. So, ang nangyari tuloy, naging experience dependent plasticity or nagkaroon ng experience dependency ang ating mga neurons na from the DNA of the early men or yung mga sinaunang tao, um, dahil nga nakasurvive tayo by training our eyes to perceive horizontals and vertical lines well, ayan, na-enhance itong plasticity ng neurons natin. So that's why we respond best to these types of lines. Diba? Kaya nga pag nakakita tayo ng structure na wavy yung line, diba, it seems to us that it doesn't look sturdy, it doesn't look reliable because of this experience dependent plasticity. Okay, so this is a good example of So, this is agreeable stimuli used in an experiment. So, makikita natin na makikita natin na the experience dependent plasticity might be doing something in determining the neurons response to phases by measuring the activity in the FFA. So remember yung FFA, ito yung part ng brain natin na nagpo-process ng mukha, diba? So like for example, itong nasa A, since we're not really trained to look at this type of faces, parang it doesn't really register a lot to us. Whereas, so parang ito tayo, before training. Pero nakita nila doon sa kanilang experiment after they have trained people to not just respond to horizontal and vertical lines. After training, nagkaroon na ng almost same na FFA response with the grebles and also with the faces. Kasi nga train na sila. Kasi before training, definitely again, this wouldn't really register to us. Especially this part. I don't even understand what it is. Pero they did something or they trained people to process other features na medyo kakaiba. So, ang naging effect is this one. So, after being trained, just to prove the experience-dependent plasticity, so nakita nila na the FFA response had become higher in the grebles or the grebel stimuli, and almost the same na with the faces. Okay? Okay, so we also have the concept of movement. Okay, so when we observe things, our movement adds complexity to the perception. Compared if it's just there, parang if it's just standing or nakaupo lang, walang ginagawa. But a moving stimulus actually allows us to create more accurate perception. So again, this is another limitation ng machines. So with the movement or adding the concept of movement mas nakikita natin, like for example, to sa figure na to, if we just look at it like this, it's quite hard to decipher na, kabayo pala yan. Diba? Pero pag, nung ginawa niya, parang 3D niya yung ikot niya. Or 360 pala, sorry. So, nakita niya na, it's a horse na parang paper mache or cardboard cutout ng horse. So, looking at it in a different angles by moving around helps to give us a better or a more accurate view of the shapes in order for us to make a better or a more reliable perception. Okay. So, what about the interaction of perception and action? So, with the constant coordination in the brain as we perceive the stimuli while also taking actions towards them. So, ganito kasi usually ang nangyayari sa atin when we perceive things and we also do an action. So, again, these things happen in a matter of millisecond. Sometimes, yung akala mo unconsciously ginagawa na natin. So, first of, when we have this thing, like for example, yung pag-breakfast. So, this, let's say this scenario when you're taking a breakfast in a fancy restaurant or ginawa mo lang na fancy ang iyong breakfast. So, first of, we see first yung ating kape. Right? So, we perceive and recognize that this is a cup. And then, we also have the orange juice here. And then, usually, di ba, pag umaga, inom ka kagad ng kape. So, you would reach for the cup here. Dahil nga nakita mo na, asa na siya. And then, C, you would grasp and pick up the cup. So, how do we do this action? We do this action with together with perception. Hindi lang siya basta ginawa natin na nagkape tayo, gusto natin magkape, so nakita nagkape tayo, kinuha na lang natin basta yung baso. Kasi nga remember, we have 2 glasses here. If there's no involvement of perception in that particular action, definitely hindi mo kukuhain or mataas yung chance na baka kung alin lang dito ang kuhain mo, gusto mo ang magkape, 'di ba? So, the A part here is very important. Otherwise, you wouldn't really see which one is coffee. Paano kung bulag? 'Di ba? What do you think a blind person will use in order to recognize which one is coffee and which one is the juice? Okay. So, aamuyin yan. So, at nasabihin mong, may juice na walang amoy. People who are blind tend to have stronger sense of smell. So, it's a way to compensate the lack of sight. So, ganun yun nangyayari. Okay. So, what are and what and where this perception and action happen? So, the what pathway, this is wherein we determine the identity of an object. So, like for example, etong ang part na to. So, we determine that this is a cup of coffee and this is a glass of juice. And this one is just a vase of flowers. Pang decor lang siya. So, understanding etong tatlong bagay na to at alam mo kung anong gusto mo, 'di ba? Gusto kong magkape. Alam mo na ngayon saan pupunta yung kamay mo. So, this is processed in the lower part of the brain, which is the ventral pathway. The where naman, ayan, determining the location of the object is on the dorsal pathway, which is at the upper part of the brain. So, again, the what is the ventral pathway, the where is the dorsal pathway. So, the what pathway identify mo which are which. The where pathway, where is it located? Okay? So, kaya alam mo na going back again to that particular slide, alam mo na nasa gitna ano ba to? Coffee cup dahil sa what and where pathway, because of the ventral and the dorsal pathway. Okay, so where are this okay, so object discrimination happens here. Yan. So you are discriminating, ano ba tong object na to? So this is a triangular shape or pyramid shape. Ito ay rectangular shape. And then the other one, B, the landmark discrimination. Asaan? Diba? Again, yung pathway kanina, nasa babang part yung what, nasa taas na part yung where. Okay, so landmark discrimination. So pick up the food well closer to the cylinder. So this is the food that's closer to the cylinder. Okay? So, as according to this figure, ang nakita nila, pag meron tayong lesions or parang injury dito sa mga part na yon, it becomes quite difficult for people to do simple tasks like determining the shape and also determining the location of the thing. So, makikita natin yun sa mga tao na may problems sa ano nila, sa cognitive functioning nila, especially mga matatanda na, and also those who have undergone like for example, yung pinsan ko, another reason why he's not able to skate anymore, kasi nga, yung part na to, yung dito niya, kasi nga ditong part na parang bumaon yung bala, hindi nag-exit wound. So, I think tatamaan tong part nito. So, kailangan niya kasi ng landmark discrimination. Syempre, di ba, when you are doing skateboard stunts, you should be able to mark saan ka magla-land and asan yung mga obstacles, right? So, dahil nga may problem na siya dito, he was advised not to do skateboarding anymore. So, yan. Okay. So, according to a study by Milner and Goodale, the perception pathway is from the visual cortex to the temporal cortex. And this corresponds to the what pathway na napag-usapan natin kanina. So, from that area, going to the temporal lobe, doon daw napaprocess kung saan natin na-discriminate or yung shapes ng object, kung paano natin na-discriminate kung alin yung alin. And then the action pathway, this is from the visual cortex to the parietal lobe. So it corresponds to the where pathway. So again, ito yung nagbibigay sa atin ng location kung asaan yung tasa ng kape para mainom mo, 'di ba? And this is also called the how pathway. Okay, so we also have the mirror neurons, which are the ones that respond while a subject watches an action being performed in the same way if the subject was performing the action. So, like for example, when we're dancing or when we're looking at a dance, right? So, na-activate doon yung mirror neurons natin. So, these are the neurons na nagre-respond when we are watching as an action being done. So, again, like for example, dancing. And then, if we're going to attempt the same action or the same dance, ito rin yung mag-respond. Okay? So, the fMRI research has found evidence of a mirror neuron system in the brain. So, this might be very well a good explanation as to why we learn a lot or we learn well when it comes to modeling. Diba? Okay. So, Iacoboni, sorry kasi medyo mahirap siya i-pronounce, found higher rate of mirroring if the subject's intention to perform the action was greater. So, this might also explain why there are some people who are able to get the dance routines better than others. Kasi mas gusto talaga nilang matutunan yun. So, like for example, J-Hope. J-Hope is said to be a good dancer, right? So, but with J-Hope, he's very interested in choreography. He's very interested in dance. So, kaya pagka, unang tingin niya pa lang, ang bilis niya nang ma-pick up. So, this particular discovery could be an explanation as to why people are able to do it faster than other people because of the higher rate of mirror neurons in their brains. Okay, so that's it for today's discussion. So please prepare for the post test or the quiz for this chapter because of the things that happened last week with the PAP convention and the cancellation or class suspension. I will be putting the exam or the quiz asynchronously. So please try and finish it within this week. Okay, so thank you so much, guys, and I'll see you in our next week's discussion or in our synchronous class. Bye, guys.